I am Daniel Carter, 45 years old, a financial expert living in Portland, Oregon. Last month, my grandfather, Edward Sullivan, whom I respected more than anyone, passed away forever. He left me his entire estate, worth over $4 million, shares in the Sullivan Supplies chain of building material stores, a house in Lake Oswego, and a robust stock investment portfolio. It wasn't just money, it was the legacy of a man who built everything from scratch. But as soon as the will was announced, my life began to unravel. My wife Claire, with whom I've shared 20 years, demanded I hand over the entire estate to her. When I refused, things turned ugly. I still vividly recall that day, right after my grandfather's funeral. We sat in the living room of our house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, where Claire and I had built our home. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the expensive leather sofa Claire had insisted on buying years ago. Despite my objections, she looked at me, her brown eyes gleaming with determination. "Daniel, this is our family's wealth," Claire said, her voice sweet but calculated. "You can't keep it all to yourself. We need it to pay off debts, to care for Lily and Noah, and to invest in our future." I knew she was referring to the debts her brother Ryan had racked up from failed business ventures, or the plan to buy a vacation home in Bend she'd mentioned for months. But I couldn't agree. My grandfather had told me this wealth wasn't just money, it was a responsibility. "Claire, he wanted me to manage it," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "He trusted me to use it the right way." She sprang from her chair, her face flushed. "The right way? You think I don't know how to handle money? You're selfish, Daniel. You don't care about our kids, about this family." Her words cut like a knife, though I was used to her outbursts. Claire always had a way of making things personal when she didn't get her way. I tried to explain that I wasn't keeping the wealth for myself, but to honor my grandfather's wishes, but she wouldn't listen. She stormed out of the room, leaving me with a heavy feeling. I knew this was just the beginning. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. This morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Family meeting at 3 p.m. tomorrow at the house. We need to settle this once and for all. Be there." No invitation, no question mark, just a command. I stared at the message, a sinking feeling rising in my chest. Claire wasn't the type to call a family meeting just to talk. She was planning something, and I wasn't sure I was ready. But I knew I had to face it, not just for myself, but for the promise I made to my grandfather. Last night I couldn't sleep. Sitting in the small study of my apartment in Portland, I looked out the window where the city lights flickered. I wondered if my grandfather Edward had foreseen this when he left his entire estate to me. He always said money could reveal people's true nature, and now I was seeing it in my own family. My grandfather Edward Sullivan wasn't just family, he was my mentor. When I was a boy, he'd take me to the main Sullivan Supplies store in downtown Portland. While other kids played basketball or watched cartoons, I sat in his office, fascinated by ledgers and revenue reports. "You've got a sharp mind, Daniel," he said once, when I spotted a minor error in a building materials order. "But what matters more is your heart. Business isn't just about money, it's about people." Those Saturday mornings became cherished memories, where I learned not only how to negotiate with suppliers, but also how to treat employees fairly. My grandfather always stressed, "A company is only as strong as the people who work for it feel respected." Claire, on the other hand, never grasped those values. When we married, I thought my love could change her. Claire was beautiful, charming, and full of energy, qualities that captivated me 20 years ago. But early on I saw signs of her extravagant spending habits. She loved luxury items, designer handbags, expensive watches, and lavish parties to impress friends. I remember the first time she borrowed money from my grandfather, $20,000, she said, to fix the roof at Laurelhurst. But weeks later, I saw a new diamond necklace sparkling on her neck. I asked, and she just smiled, saying it was a self-reward. My grandfather knew but said nothing. Only his sad eyes haunted me. Over the years it got worse. Claire kept asking my grandfather for money, citing reasons like medical costs for Lily, special tuition for Noah, or even house debts. I discovered much of it went to fund her brother Ryan, who always failed at ventures from coffee shops to real estate. Once, I found a bill for a Hawaii vacation Claire said was needed to de-stress. The cost, $30,000, was another loan from my grandfather. I confronted her, but Claire just cried, saying I didn't understand her pressures. I gave in, as I often did, because I didn't want to break our family. But deep down, I knew I was betraying what my grandfather taught me. Now, with the will announced, Claire didn't just want the wealth, she wanted to control it. She called her parents, Margaret and Henry, to complain about my selfishness. Margaret, with a soft but sharp tone, said I had a duty to my wife's family. Claire sacrificed so much for the kids. "Daniel," she said over the phone, "you can't keep all the money to yourself." Ryan was blunter. He texted, Who do you think you are, keeping my family's money? I put the phone down, feeling besieged. My daughter Lily started changing too. She was once my pride, a smart college student, always beaming when we talked about her future. But now she avoided my gaze when we met. Claire had swayed her, saying I was stealing her opportunities. One evening, Lily texted, "Dad, why won't you share the money with Mom? She says I won't have enough for college if you keep it all." The message stung like a blade. I replied that I'd always provide for her, but she didn't respond. Noah, my son, thankfully stayed neutral. The 17-year-old was quiet but perceptive. Once he said, "Mom keeps saying you're selfish, but I'm not sure she's right." I hugged Noah, knowing I still had an ally. The pressure wasn't just from family. Claire started spreading rumors on social media. She posted vague statuses about family betrayal and greedy people. Our mutual friends, whom I thought were close, began looking at me with suspicion. A neighbor even asked, "Daniel, you okay? Heard you and Claire are fighting over money." I forced a smile, unwilling to explain, but inside, I knew Claire was trying to break me. I began suspecting Claire had exploited my grandfather more than I realized. The loans she asked for, hundreds of thousands over the years, couldn't just be for personal shopping. Had she funded Ryan more than I knew? Had she planned to use the inheritance long before my grandfather's death? Those questions kept me restless. I resolved to uncover the truth before the family meeting. I needed evidence to protect not just the wealth, but my grandfather's spiritual legacy. That night in the dark, I thought of my grandfather. I recalled our last talk, when he lay in his hospital bed, his frail hand gripping mine. "Daniel, you'll face pressure," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. "Stand strong. I trust you." Those words now felt like a reminder. I couldn't let Claire destroy what my grandfather built, but I also couldn't let my family fall apart. I had to find a balance, no matter how hard it was. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. "Don't forget to bring banking documents. We'll need them for the meeting." The next morning, I woke with a heavy feeling, as if the world was pressing on my shoulders. I knew today's family meeting at the Laurelhurst house wouldn't be simple. Claire was setting a trap, and I needed to prepare to avoid falling into it. But to do that, I needed proof. Proof that my grandfather Edward Sullivan chose me for a reason, and that Claire didn't deserve what she demanded. I picked up the phone and called Michael Hayes, my closest friend. Michael worked in construction, had collaborated with Sullivan Supplies, and was the only person I trusted now. We agreed to meet at a small bar in Portland's Pearl District, where dim lights and a quiet atmosphere made it easier to open up. "Claire's trying to force you to cave," Michael said, sipping his beer. "She doesn't just want the money, she wants to control it all. You need proof of Edward's intentions, something undeniable." I nodded, sharing my suspicions about the loans Claire had taken from my grandfather. Michael paused, then said, "Check your grandfather's house in Lake Oswego. He was meticulous, he must have kept records. And find Rebecca Stone, a lawyer specializing in inheritance disputes. She's sharp and will help you." I left the bar with a clear plan. First, I drove to my grandfather's house in Lake Oswego, about 20 minutes from Portland. The house sat by the lake, with a manicured lawn and large windows overlooking the shimmering water. I stepped inside, feeling as if my grandfather was still there, sitting in his office with a cup of coffee. I went straight to the safe, hidden behind a painting of the first Sullivan Supplies store. The code was my birth date, a detail only I knew. When the safe opened, my heart raced. Inside were insurance papers, property deeds, and a dark brown leather-bound journal. I flipped through the pages, finding my grandfather's neat handwritten notes. The journal recorded everything, not just business but family matters too. I froze when I read entries about Claire. Today Claire asked for $40,000, saying it was for house debt. I doubt it, but I don't want to upset Daniel. Money transferred. Another entry. Claire needed $25,000 for Lily's medical costs. Turned out to be for jewelry. I'm disappointed. In total, over the last 5 years of his life, my grandfather had given Claire more than $200,000, none of it used for its stated purpose. I snapped photos of the journal pages, feeling a mix of anger and heartache. My grandfather had tried to protect me, but I hadn't seen it. I knew I needed more evidence, so I called William Grant, my grandfather's best friend. William, a 78-year-old retired engineer, agreed to meet me at Brood Awakening in Portland the next morning. When I arrived, he was already at a corner table, with a black coffee and a sharp gaze. "You look like Edward, especially the eyes," William said, his voice deep but warm. I told him about the situation with Claire, the pressure from her family. William nodded, as if he'd expected it. Edward worried about this for years. He knew Claire didn't understand the value of money. Then he pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. "Edward gave me this a few months before he passed. He said if there was ever a dispute over the will, I should give it to you." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter from my grandfather, written shortly after his heart disease diagnosis. "Daniel," it began, I leave my estate to you because you're the only one who understands that money is a responsibility, not a privilege. Claire has proven she cannot manage it. I trust you to protect this legacy, no matter how great the pressure. The letter ended with a note. Stand firm, son. I'm always proud of you. I folded the letter, tears welling up. William placed his hand on my shoulder. Edward wasn't easily manipulated. If he chose you, it's because you're worthy. Back at my apartment, I contacted Rebecca Stone, the lawyer Michael had recommended. We met at the Stone & Associates office in downtown Portland. Rebecca, a woman in her 40s with a sharp gaze, reviewed the letter and photos of the journal. This is strong evidence, she said. Edward's will is clear, and these documents reinforce his intentions. But I suspect Claire won't give up easily. This afternoon's meeting could be a trap to pressure you into signing papers. She advised me to record all communications with Claire and not to sign any documents without a lawyer's review. Stay calm, Daniel, Rebecca said. We'll protect this legacy. As I left the office, I felt a sense of relief but still anxious. I knew the family meeting would be a major challenge. Claire wasn't acting alone. Ryan, Lily, and those two mysterious advisors were surely well prepared by her. I texted Rebecca, confirming she'd wait near my house in case intervention was needed. Then I steeled myself, determined to face Claire and protect what my grandfather had entrusted to me. I drove to the house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, my heart pounding in my chest. The clock read exactly 3 p.m., but the atmosphere outside felt heavier than usual. The window curtains were drawn shut, a rare sight during the day. I gripped the leather briefcase containing my grandfather Edward's letter and journal photos, feeling as if I carried an invisible shield. Claire had planned this meeting, and I knew it wouldn't be a simple family conversation. With Rebecca Stone's advice echoing in my mind, stay calm, don't sign anything, I took a deep breath and stepped onto the porch. The door opened before I could knock. Claire stood there, in an expensive silk dress I'd never seen before, her smile perfect but cold. Daniel, punctual as always, she said, her voice sweet but calculated, as if playing a role in a carefully rehearsed play. I nodded, saying nothing, and followed her into the living room. The air inside was stifling, as if every gaze was waiting to judge me. My daughter Lily sat rigidly on the sofa, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. Noah, my son, sat beside her, his glance flicking to me with worry. Ryan, Claire's brother, leaned against the fireplace, arms crossed, eyes glinting with hostility. Claire's parents, Margaret and Henry, sat in the corner, their expressions stern but clearly aligned with their daughter. And then I saw them, two men in glossy suits, seated in the armchairs usually reserved for family. They looked like sharks in expensive clothing, ready to strike. Daniel, Claire said, her voice triumphant, gesturing toward the two men. This is Mr. Thompson and Mr. Brooks, our financial advisors. They'll help resolve this fairly. I nodded, not offering a handshake, sensing the tension in the air. The only empty seat was a hard wooden chair, positioned facing everyone, as if I were a defendant in a trial. I sat down, placing the leather briefcase on my lap, trying to keep my face composed. Coffee, Daniel? Claire asked, continuing her role as the perfect hostess, but I knew it was a facade. No thanks, I replied, my voice even. I'd like to know the purpose of this meeting. Mr. Thompson, who seemed to be the leader, cleared his throat, leaning forward with feigned concern. Daniel, your family is very concerned about the burden Mr. Sullivan's will has placed on your shoulders, he said, his voice smooth like a salesman's. Managing such a large estate is complex, especially for someone as busy as you. I raised an eyebrow, suppressing a wry smile. I'd worked in finance for nearly 20 years, managing portfolios for major companies. If anyone in this room understood money management, it was me. I appreciate the concern, I replied, but I've dealt with finances my whole career. I think I can handle it. Claire smiled, but her eyes were icy. Of course, darling, she said, her tone saccharine to the point of falseness, but this is a family matter. Your grandfather surely wanted us all to benefit, not just one person. Her words made me tense. My grandfather had written a clear will, leaving everything to me, not because I was the only one he loved, but because he knew I'd use it properly. But before I could respond, Lily spoke, her voice trembling, as if reciting a script Claire had directed. Dad, Grandpa couldn't have wanted you to keep all the money. He loved us all. You know I need money for college. My daughter's words cut like a knife, but I realized they were Claire's words, not Lily's. Lily, I'll always provide for you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but Grandpa had his reasons for writing the will this way. Claire interrupted, her tone sharper. Reasons? He was gravely ill, Daniel. You were with him too much, whispering what you wanted. Who knows what you told him? The accusation stunned me, but I tried not to let emotion take over. Ryan jumped in, his voice hostile. You think you're smarter than all of us, don't you? This is my sister's money too, Daniel. I won't let you steal it that easily. Mr. Brooks, the second man, opened his leather briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of documents. We've prepared a simple solution, he said, his voice slick, to honor Mr. Sullivan's intentions while ensuring family harmony. Claire nodded, her smile radiantly false. "They've been so helpful, Daniel," she said. "This way everyone will be happy." I looked at the documents, my heart beating faster. "What solution?" I asked, though I already had an inkling. "A voluntary redistribution," Mr. Thompson explained, sliding the documents toward me. "You'll transfer the Sullivan Supplies shares and investment portfolio to Claire, who has experience managing the family. You'll retain a portion, about 20%, very generous. The properties will be liquidated, the proceeds split equally among everyone. Lily needs college funds, Noah's nearing college, and Claire has medical expenses to address." I glanced at Noah, who shook his head slightly, as if to say he knew nothing about this. "What medical expenses of Claire's?" I asked, my voice calm but pointed. Claire answered immediately, her voice rising slightly. "That's private, Daniel. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Ryan stepped forward, his tone threatening. "Look, Daniel, we can do this the easy way, or the hard way. These gentlemen have prepared documents to contest the will if needed. On what grounds? Undue influence. Mr. Sullivan was old, sick. You were with him too much. A judge will find that suspicious." His words hit like a punch, but I kept my face neutral. I looked at the documents on the table, knowing I needed time to review them, but also knowing Claire wouldn't give me that chance. I sat on the hard wooden chair in the Laurelhurst house's living room, gripping the documents Mr. Thompson had just pushed toward me. The air in the room was heavy, as if every gaze was waiting for me to crumble. Claire sat across from me, a smug smile glinting in her eyes. Lily, my daughter, kept her head down, avoiding my gaze. Ryan, Claire's brother, stood with arms crossed, his eyes hostile. Her parents Margaret and Henry maintained neutral expressions, but I knew they sided with their daughter. Mr. Brooks, the other half of the financial advisor duo, smiled, as if everything was already in their control. I flipped through a few pages of the documents, pretending to review them, but my mind was clear. This wasn't a fair agreement. It was a blatant attempt to seize my grandfather Edward Sullivan's entire legacy. I looked up, meeting Claire's eyes. "Before I decide," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I have one question, Claire. When did you put the deposit down for the vacation home in Bend?" My question silenced the room. Claire froze, her smile stiffening. "What are you talking about?" she replied, her voice slightly shaky. "Ryan mentioned it in a phone call." I continued, shifting my gaze to her brother. "He said you put a deposit down 6 months ago, when my grandfather's doctor gave his final diagnosis." Ryan faltered, glancing at Claire with panic. "I never said that," he growled, but his hesitation betrayed him. "I recorded that call," I said evenly, pulling my phone from my pocket for emphasis. "Just like I've recorded every message, every threat, and every lie about your financial hardships, while you kept shopping for luxury goods." Mr. Thompson straightened, adjusting his tie nervously. "Mr. Carter, family disputes can be very emotional," he interjected. "Let's focus on the documents at hand." I nodded, giving a slight smile, not the submissive one Claire was used to, but the confident one my grandfather used when closing a big deal. "Fine," I said, opening my leather briefcase. "But first I have some documents I'd like to share." Claire stood abruptly, her voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. You're trying to smear me, like I'm some greedy monster. I'm your wife, Daniel. I deserve this wealth." I didn't respond, just quietly pulled out the photocopies of my grandfather's journal. "On this day, Claire asked for $40,000 to pay off house debt," I read aloud, my voice clear. "But that money was used to buy a convertible. I found the receipt in the trash." I placed a photo from Claire's Instagram, showing her posing by the car, captioned, "Deserved treat, living great." The room went silent. Lily lifted her head, her eyes shocked. Noah, my son, clenched his fists, as if holding back anger. I continued, my voice unwavering. "On this date, Claire said she needed $25,000 for Lily's medical expenses. But Lily wasn't sick. That money went to a Cancun vacation." I presented another Instagram photo of Claire on a beach with a cocktail, captioned, "Paradise calling, relaxation." Mr. Brooks snapped his briefcase shut, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Carter," he said, "we don't need to dig up the past." But I didn't stop. "My grandfather documented everything, Claire," I said, looking straight into her eyes. "Every lie, every loan, every promise to repay that you never kept. Over $200,000 in 5 years, and not a single dollar used for its intended purpose." Claire paled, then exploded. "How dare you," she screamed. "After everything I've done for this family? I sacrificed my career, raised Lily and Noah, while you just worked." I shook my head, feeling a mix of pain and resolve. "Sacrificed? What about the money my grandfather gave you for my college tuition, which you spent on a Napa spa trip? It's in here too." I pointed to an entry in the journal. Margaret and Henry exchanged uneasy glances. Ryan tried to cut in. "You're making this up to keep the money for yourself," but his voice lacked conviction. Then Noah stood, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, looking at Claire. "But I don't want to be part of this. You lied, not just to Dad but to me and Lily too." The room seemed to freeze. Lily looked at Noah, then at me, her eyes conflicted. Claire turned to Noah, her voice nearly a shout. "Sit down, Noah. You don't know how I'm trying to protect this family." But Noah shook his head, stepping over to stand beside me. "I'm going with Dad," he said, his voice steadier than ever. I looked at Claire one last time, feeling both anger and pity. "This meeting is over," I said, gathering my documents. "I'm not signing anything, Claire. My grandfather was clear about his intentions, and I'll honor them." I turned to Mr. Thompson and Mr. Brooks. "And you two, if you're really financial advisors, I suggest checking your legal standing. My lawyer Rebecca Stone is waiting outside. She'd love to discuss how you're pressuring me to sign documents under duress." The two men stood hastily, their faces pale. "We didn't know a lawyer was involved," Mr. Brooks muttered, closing his briefcase. I walked out of the room, Noah by my side. Claire shouted after me, "This isn't over, Daniel." But as I stepped onto the porch, hearing the door slam behind me, I knew I'd overcome the biggest challenge. I glanced at my son, seeing both determination and pain in his eyes. Noah was only 17, but today he'd grown up more than ever by standing up to his mother. I placed a hand on his shoulder, managing a reassuring smile. "You okay?" I asked. Noah nodded, but his voice was soft. I didn't expect Mom to be like that. I didn't know what to say, just squeezed his shoulder lightly before we walked to the car, where Rebecca Stone was waiting. Rebecca looked at us, her gaze sharp but caring. "How'd it go?" she asked, opening the car door. I briefly recounted the meeting, how I exposed Claire with my grandfather Edward's journal and letter, and how Noah chose to stand by me. Rebecca nodded, jotting quick notes on her phone. "You did great, Daniel," she said. "But Claire won't stop easily. She might sue, or worse, apply pressure in other ways. You need to be ready." She advised me to install security cameras at my apartment and keep recording all contact with Claire. "And Noah," she turned to my son, "if you want to stay with your dad, we can arrange it legally." Noah nodded, his eyes resolute. "I don't want to go back there." On the drive back to my apartment in Portland, Noah and I barely spoke, but the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was a mutual understanding. When we arrived, Noah looked around my small apartment, a simple space with a desk, an old sofa, and a few family photos. "Where do I sleep?" he asked, trying for a bit of humor. I laughed, pulling out the sofa bed. "Welcome to the Carter Hotel," I replied. Noah chuckled, and that brief moment eased my heart. Despite the chaos, I still had my son by my side, but that relief didn't last. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages and calls. Claire sent a barrage of texts, alternating between rage and pleading. "You can't do this to me, Daniel. I'm your wife," one read. Another was softer. "Let's talk for the kids." I didn't respond, following Rebecca's advice. Ryan, Claire's brother, called, leaving a threatening voicemail. "You think you won, huh? I'll make you pay." I saved the voicemail, feeling besieged. Margaret and Henry, Claire's parents, called too, Margaret's voice gentle but reproachful. "Daniel, you're destroying the family. Think it over." The pressure wasn't just from Claire's family. She started spreading rumors on social media, posting vague statuses about betrayal and selfish people stealing family money. A colleague at the financial firm where I work texted, "Heard you and Claire are fighting over money. Need any help?" I replied briefly that everything was fine, but inside I felt isolated. Even a neighbor in my building gave me a curious look when we passed in the hallway. Claire was painting me as the villain in her story. Lily, my daughter, remained silent. I texted her saying I was always ready to talk, but got no reply. That evening, though, she sent a short message. "Dad, I'm sorry for what I said. I was just confused. I need time." The message gave me both hope and heartache. Lily was caught between Claire and me, and I didn't want to force her to choose sides. I replied, "I understand, sweetheart. I'm always here when you're ready." Meanwhile, I started thinking about the future of the inheritance. My grandfather Edward didn't leave me just money, but a responsibility to protect and grow Sullivan Supplies, the company he built from nothing. I called my best friend Michael Hayes to discuss returning to the company. "You sure about this?" Michael asked, his voice skeptical. "The business is stable, but competing with big chains isn't easy. And with this family drama," I cut him off. "I have to do this, Michael. For my grandfather, and for myself." Michael agreed to help me connect with store managers, and I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was how I'd find purpose amid the chaos. But the pressure from Claire didn't stop. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Ryan's voice came through, slurred from drinking. "You think you're so smart, huh?" he snarled. "Claire's falling apart because of you. She had plans for that money, a house in Bend, a better life. You ruined it all." I stayed calm, recording the call as Rebecca had advised. "Ryan, I'm not arguing with you," I replied. He scoffed, then hung up, leaving me uneasy. I checked the newly installed security cameras and saw a suspicious car parked near my building the previous night. I wasn't sure if it was Claire or Ryan, but I texted Rebecca immediately. Noah noticed my stress. One evening, as we ate pizza on the sofa, he said, "Dad, I know this is tough, but I believe you're doing the right thing. Grandpa always said you were the one he trusted most. His words were like a balm. I looked at Noah, seeing my grandfather's resolute eyes in him. Thank you, son, I said, my voice hoarse. We'll get through this together. Noah nodded, and I knew that, despite the challenges ahead, I wasn't alone. I met with Rebecca at the Stone & Associates office in downtown Portland to discuss next steps. After reviewing my grandfather's letter and journal, she proposed a clear plan. We need to file these documents with the probate court to strengthen your position, Rebecca said, her voice professional. This will make any legal challenges from Claire much harder. She also suggested setting up financial trusts to address family pressure without relinquishing control. After hours of discussion, I decided to establish 3 separate funds. The first was a scholarship fund for Noah, and possibly Lily if she came around, ensuring my kids' education. The second was a charitable fund, named after Edward Sullivan, focused on supporting young entrepreneurs in construction, something I knew my grandfather would be proud of. Finally, I set up a limited support fund for Claire, with strict conditions to prevent misuse, like monthly withdrawals for basic living expenses only. This is how you show compassion without losing your principles, Rebecca said, and I agreed. Alongside legal matters, I focused on Sullivan Supplies, the company my grandfather dedicated his life to building. I took a temporary leave from my finance job to spend time at the stores. Sullivan Supplies was still profitable, but competition from big chains like Home Depot had cut into revenue. I visited each Portland store, talking with managers and employees, realizing the company needed a new direction. Noah, with his youthful enthusiasm, unexpectedly became a source of inspiration. One evening, as we ate dinner in the apartment, he said, "Dad, Grandpa used to talk about eco-friendly building materials. He said they were the future, but he didn't have the energy to shift the business model." I looked at Noah, surprised. "You listened to him talk business?" Noah nodded, a bit shy. I liked hearing him, even if I didn't get it all. His words moved me. I saw a piece of my grandfather in Noah, his curiosity and passion. Noah and I started researching, contacting suppliers of green materials from recycled wood to non-toxic paints. We decided to open a new showroom in Portland, specializing in eco-friendly products, targeting young customers and environmentally conscious contractors. I hired a marketing team to position Sullivan Supplies as a progressive alternative to soulless big chains. Noah joined as an intern, learning inventory management and supplier negotiations, just as I had from my grandfather. Watching him work, I felt proud, as if my grandfather's legacy was being carried on through a new generation. Meanwhile, my relationship with Lily showed signs of improvement. One afternoon she texted, asking to meet at Brood Awakening, where I'd once spoken with William Grant. When I arrived, Lily was already seated in the corner, looking smaller in a simple sweater, far from the flashy style Claire often imposed. "Dad," she said, her voice hesitant, "I'm sorry for what I said at the meeting. I believed Mom, but I was wrong." I looked at my daughter, seeing sincerity mixed with pain in her eyes. "I understand, Lily," I replied. "Your mom has a way of convincing people, but I never wanted you to pick sides." Lily shared that Claire was increasingly stressed, selling jewelry to pay debts, and even arguing with Ryan. "I see Mom struggling, but I don't want to hurt you anymore," she said. I held her hand, promising to be there whenever she needed me. That meeting didn't erase our distance, but it was a first step. I decided to move to my grandfather's house in Lake Oswego. Partly because my apartment was too small for Noah and me, partly because I wanted to be closer to his memory. The house was spacious, with a view of the lake, but I kept most rooms as they were, only turning my grandfather's office into a shared workspace for Noah and me. We hung his portrait above the fireplace, his eyes seeming to watch, approving our changes. Sullivan Supplies began to recover, with the new showroom drawing steady customers. Noah suggested a bold idea, partnering with local universities to supply materials for student projects, both promoting the brand and supporting the community. I smiled, realizing he had not only a knack for business but also my grandfather's heart. Despite progress, I didn't forget Claire. I sent details of the support fund to her through Rebecca, but she refused, saying she didn't need charity. I didn't push, but kept the fund open, hoping she'd change her mind someday. I also started planning the Edward Sullivan Charitable Fund. I contacted a Portland nonprofit, outlining plans to fund entrepreneurship courses for youth from underserved areas, just as my grandfather had mentored me. One morning, as I reviewed Sullivan Supplies revenue reports in the Lake Oswego office, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject was a single word: peace. The sender was Claire. I hesitated, recalling her angry and threatening messages after the meeting, but curiosity won, and I opened it. "Daniel," she wrote, "I've taken time to reflect. I'm tired of being angry. It changes nothing, only makes me more miserable. Lily says your company is thriving, and Noah's happy at school. I miss the kids. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. No lawyers, no demands, just talk. Claire." I read it repeatedly, searching for signs of manipulation, but found none. Her words were simple, almost sincere. I asked Noah and Lily for their thoughts before deciding. Noah shrugged, his voice cautious. If Mom wants to talk, maybe you should try, but don't let her pressure you. Lily, via a video call from her college dorm, was more hopeful. Mom's changing, Dad. She's in therapy, and she's not fighting with Uncle Ryan anymore. Finally, I texted my best friend Michael Hayes, who laughed over the phone. You're a patient man, Daniel. Meet her, but stay sharp. I agreed to meet Claire at a small restaurant in downtown Portland, with Michael waiting nearby as a precaution. When I entered the restaurant, Claire was already at a corner table, wearing a simple blouse instead of her usual expensive silk dress. She looked tired, her hair tied back, no heavy makeup. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice soft, reminding me of our early marriage days. How are you, Claire? I asked, sitting down. She gave a faint smile. Trying. I rented a smaller apartment near Selwood, less to clean. She paused, fidgeting with her glass. Ryan and I, we don't talk much anymore. He just kept asking for money, and I realized I was wrong to always give in. I was surprised to hear Claire admit fault. She shared that she'd started therapy at Lily's suggestion, and it helped her reflect on her actions. I always felt empty, Daniel, she said, eyes down. I thought money would fill that void, but it didn't. I hurt you and the kids. I listened, not interrupting, feeling both relief and caution. Your grandfather once said Ryan made me worse, she continued. Now I think he was right. That admission stunned me. Claire had never acknowledged my grandfather's insight about money. The conversation didn't erase the wounds, but it was a start. Claire asked about Sullivan Supplies, and I told her about the new showroom and charitable fund. She listened, her eyes sincere when I mentioned Noah and Lily. Before leaving, she said, Edward would be proud of you, Daniel, not just for what you've done with the money, but for how you got through this, despite me making it hard. Her words moved me, but I only nodded, not yet ready to fully forgive. In the months that followed, my relationship with Claire slowly improved, though clear boundaries remained. She attended the new Sullivan Supplies showroom opening, standing quietly in the back, but stayed for cake afterward. Lily, inspired by the charitable fund, began volunteering at a youth support center, and talked about studying social work. Noah, nearing high school graduation, was accepted into a business program at the University of Oregon, excited about his internship at Sullivan Supplies. Michael, always by my side, joked that I should retire early and let Noah run the company. Not so fast, I laughed, but I was proud of my son. Looking back on this journey, I realized my grandfather's legacy wasn't just money or Sullivan Supplies, but the values he instilled in me: resilience, responsibility, and compassion. Facing family pressure was the hardest thing I've ever done, but through it, I discovered my own strength, the ability to be both firm and forgiving. The story of Daniel Carter in Portland, Oregon, reflects the financial and family conflicts so common in today's American society, where economic pressures and personal values often clash. Daniel's inheritance of $4 million from his grandfather Edward Sullivan, and his confrontation with manipulation from his wife Claire and pressure from her family like Ryan, highlight the reality that money can reveal people's true nature, as Edward once said. In American culture, where individualism and financial responsibility are valued, this story underscores the importance of setting healthy boundaries, as Daniel did by refusing to yield to Claire but still creating a support fund for her with strict conditions. This action reflects the American value of financial independence paired with compassion. Daniel's use of the wealth to expand Sullivan Supplies with eco-friendly materials and establish a charitable fund for young entrepreneurs also mirrors modern U.S. trends, where businesses increasingly focus on social responsibility and environmental sustainability. The lesson: to apply this to real life in the U.S., learn from Daniel's resilience and compassion. When facing family financial conflicts, like inheritance disputes, hold firm to your principles, as Daniel did in protecting Edward's legacy. But don't close your heart. Set clear boundaries, like documenting communications, or hiring a lawyer like Rebecca Stone to safeguard your rights. At the same time, find ways to contribute to the community, like Daniel's charitable fund, to turn wealth into lasting value. Finally, be patient in mending family ties, as Daniel was with Claire and Lily, because even in America's individualistic culture, family remains a foundation. This lesson reminds us that true wealth lies in how we use resources to create meaning, not just for ourselves but for society. Subscribe to the channel to follow my ongoing journey of protecting my legacy and building a future with my family. Thank you for listening to my story, and I'll see you in the next video.